As we stand on the brink of new beginnings, facing the start of a fresh chapter in our lives, we are often filled with mixed emotions. There's excitement, yes, but there's also hesitation, maybe even fear. The unknown stretches before us, and we wonder what this new season will hold. Some of us might feel the thrill of stepping into something new. Perhaps a new job, a new place to live, or a new relationship. For others, this change may be bittersweet, leaving behind something familiar, something we've grown comfortable with. Whatever it is that lies ahead, one thing is certain. We are not walking into this new chapter alone. God is right there with us, ready to guide us, to equip us, and to strengthen us for what lies ahead. This season of change isn't something we must face by ourselves or in our own strength. God has a purpose for every new beginning, and He calls us to embrace it with faith, to step forward, trusting in His perfect plan for our lives. In moments of transition, we may wonder, why is this happening? Why now? Change can be unsettling, even when it's something we've prayed for. But we must remember that God is a God of purpose, and nothing in our lives happens without His knowledge and His hand guiding it. Jeremiah 29:11 reassures us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Think about that for a moment. God already knows the plans He has for you. Before you even took your first breath, He had a purpose in mind for you, a calling unique to you. So when you find yourself on the edge of a new beginning, remember that it's not by accident. God has a reason for bringing you to this moment, and His plan is always for your good. He sees the bigger picture. He knows what's up ahead, and He invites us to trust Him as we step into the unknown. The truth is, stepping into a new chapter often requires us to leave behind something familiar. We may be leaving behind a job, a place, a role, or even certain relationships. And with that comes a sense of loss, a feeling of leaving a part of ourselves behind. But I want to encourage you that while change can be difficult, it is also an opportunity for growth. God often uses these moments to mold us, to shape our character, and to deepen our dependence on Him. In Isaiah 43:19, God says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." God is in the business of doing new things, of opening new doors and creating paths where there seem to be none. So, when we face the prospect of change, we can rest assured that God is preparing a way for us, even if we can't see it yet. He's already gone ahead of us, and He's preparing something good, something beyond what we could have imagined. Entering a new chapter is also an opportunity to grow our faith. It's a time to learn to rely on God more fully, to place our trust in His timing and His wisdom. When we can't see every step, when the path seems unclear, that's when our faith is stretched and strengthened. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This verse calls us to a deep kind of trust. A trust that isn't dependent on knowing all the answers, but is rooted in the character of God Himself. He is trustworthy, He is faithful, and He is good. When we lean not on our own understanding, when we stop trying to figure everything out and instead place our confidence in Him, we allow Him to lead us in ways that are higher and better than anything we could plan for ourselves. In every new beginning, there will be moments when we feel uncertain, maybe even afraid. That's natural. God understands our fears. He knows our worries. And yet He calls us to walk by faith, not by sight. To take that first step, even when we can't see what lies ahead. The story of Abraham in Genesis is a powerful example of this kind of faith. God called Abraham to leave his home, his family, everything he knew, and go to a place that He would show him. Abraham didn't have a map. He didn't have all the details, but he had a promise from God, and he chose to trust in that promise. Hebrews 11:8 says, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Abraham's faith was rooted in his trust in God's character, in his belief that God's character, in his belief that God's promises were true. Like Abraham, we may not have all the answers as we step into a new chapter, but we have the same God, the same faithful promise keeper guiding us along the way. So, as we stand here on the edge of this new beginning, let's embrace it with faith. Let's hold on to the promises that God has spoken over our lives, remembering that He is with us, that He has a purpose in every step we take, and that He will guide us through every season. Whether this new chapter is one you've longed for or one you never anticipated, you can face it with confidence, knowing that God's hand is upon you. He is the one who opens doors that no one can shut and who makes a way in the wilderness. When we step forward in faith, we are stepping into His plan, His purpose, and His promise. This new chapter is not just about where we are going. It's about who we are becoming as we trust in Him. God is faithful, and He will be faithful in this season just as He has been in every season before. So let's step forward together with faith as our foundation and God as our guide, ready to see all that He has in store for us in this new chapter. As we continue our journey into this new chapter, one essential step stands before us, and it's a step that many of us find challenging. It's the step of letting go. Friends, moving forward often requires leaving something behind. It's a truth we see over and over in Scripture, and a truth that we encounter in our own lives. And while it may sound simple, the act of letting go can be one of the most difficult things God asks of us. You see, sometimes we cling tightly to the things we know, the comfort of what's familiar or the safety of what's predictable. Even when God is calling us to something new, we may feel a pull to hold on to the past, our past achievements, our past roles, even our past failures. But in order to step fully into what God has prepared for us, we must be willing to release what lies behind. We cannot embrace what's ahead if our hands and hearts are still holding on to what has already passed. The Bible is filled with stories of those who had to let go to move forward. Think about the Israelites standing on the edge of the promised land. God had delivered them from Egypt. He had provided for them in the wilderness, and now He was calling them into a new place, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yet many of them longed for Egypt, the land they had left behind. Egypt was a place of slavery and hardship, yet it was also familiar. It was what they knew. In Numbers 14:3-4, we see their fear as they say, "Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" They were so afraid of what lay ahead that they actually considered returning to a place of bondage. And while it may seem surprising, don't we sometimes do the same? Don't we sometimes find ourselves longing for the familiar, even if it's not God's best for us? Moving forward requires a willingness to let go of what is comfortable, to release the past, and to trust that what God has ahead is far better than anything we leave behind. Another powerful example of letting go is found in the story of the Apostle Paul. Paul had every reason to cling to his past accomplishments. He was a man of great learning, a Pharisee of Pharisees, respected and influential. But when he encountered Jesus, he had to let go of everything he once valued. In Philippians 3:7-8, Paul says, "But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord." Paul let go of his past identity, his achievements, and even his status to pursue something greater, knowing Christ. For Paul, letting go wasn't a loss. It was a gain because he was gaining Christ. When we let go of what we're holding on to, we make room for God to fill our lives with something greater, something eternal. God is not asking us to let go to leave us empty. He is asking us to let go so that He can fill our hands with His blessings, with His purpose, and with His purpose, and with His presence. But friends, letting go isn't just about releasing what's comfortable. Sometimes it's about surrendering our pain, our regrets, and our mistakes. Some of us hold on to past failures like a badge, allowing them to define who we are and who we believe we can become. We replay our mistakes. We dwell on what went wrong, and we let our past weigh us down. But God does not want us to be held captive by our past failures. In Isaiah 43:18-19, he tells us, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? God is always doing something new, but to step into that new thing, we must be willing to let go of the old. We must let go of the regrets, the what-ifs, and the shame that the enemy tries to use against us. When we let go of these burdens, we are free to step forward, unhindered by the weight of yesterday. God's grace is more than enough to cover our past, and His forgiveness is complete. We are not defined by our mistakes. We are defined by our mistakes. We are defined by His love and by the new life He offers us. Letting go also requires faith. It means trusting that even if we don't understand why something is changing, God does. It means believing that He sees the whole picture while we see only a piece. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Our understanding is limited, but God's wisdom is infinite. When we let go, we are saying, Lord, I don't have all the answers, but I trust that you do. I trust that your plans are higher, that your ways are better, and that your purposes are good. Letting go is an act of surrender, a way of placing our lives fully in God's hands and trusting Him to lead us forward. Perhaps some of us are struggling to let go of relationships or situations that were once meaningful but are no longer part of God's plan for our lives. These can be some of the hardest things to release, especially when there's a sense of loss or heartache involved. But remember, God is faithful. When He asks us to let go, it's not to hurt us. It's to heal us, to protect us, and to guide us toward what He knows is best. Sometimes God prunes things from our lives so that we can bear more fruit, so that we can bear more fruit, so that we can grow stronger in our faith. John 15:2 tells us, every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. Pruning may be painful, but it is purposeful. God removes what is no longer serving His purpose in our lives so that we can flourish, so that we can step into the fullness of what He has prepared for us. As we stand on the threshold of this new chapter, let's take a moment to examine our hearts. What is God calling you to let go of today? Is it a past hurt, a regret, a fear, or maybe a comfort zone that you've been hesitant to leave behind. Whatever it may be, I encourage you to bring it to God, to lay it down at His feet, and to trust that He has something better ahead. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting or disregarding the past. It means releasing it into God's hands, trusting Him to work all things together for good. It means choosing to move forward with open hands, ready to receive what God has in store. Friends, as we let go, we make space for something new, something better, something that God has specifically prepared for us. Embrace this act of release not as a loss, but as an opening for God's blessing. Trust that He is with you in this journey, and let your faith be your guide as you step forward. The God who has brought you this far will not leave you now. Let go of what lies behind and take hold of the new chapter He has written just for you. As we continue to walk through this journey of stepping into a new chapter, we come to the vital element of trusting God's guidance. Trusting Him when things are clear and everything makes sense. That's easy. But what about those moments when the way forward is uncertain? When we don't have all the answers, and when God's path doesn't align with our expectations? Friends, those are the moments when true faith takes root. Trusting God's guidance is not about understanding every detail or seeing every step. It's about believing that the one who holds the future knows what He's doing. It's about resting in His wisdom and His perfect timing. In Proverbs 3, 5, 6, we read, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight." When we trust in God, we're choosing to lean on His understanding rather than our own. We're saying, "Lord, I may not see the whole picture, but I believe You do. I may not know the way, but I trust that You're guiding me on the right path." When God calls us into a new chapter, He doesn't give us a map of every twist and turn we'll face. He doesn't outline every obstacle or blessing that's up ahead. But He does give us His promises, and His promises are enough. One of the most comforting promises we have is found in Isaiah 40:110, where God says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Think about that for a moment. God is with you. The creator of the universe, the one who spoke the stars into existence, is by your side, guiding you, strengthening you, upholding you. This promise isn't just for the easy times. It's for the difficult ones, the times of uncertainty, the moments when we feel weak. God's presence is constant, and His strength is available to us whenever we call upon Him. Even when we don't understand the path, we can trust the guide. He sees what we cannot, and His plans for us are rooted in His love and His wisdom. Let me tell you, friends, that trusting God's guidance often requires us to take steps that don't make sense to the world. When God calls us to move in a certain direction, there may be those around us who question our decisions, who don't understand why we're choosing to follow a path that doesn't seem logical or safe. But faith is not about following the wisdom of the world. It's about following the wisdom of God. Consider the story of Peter in Matthew 14. Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, and when Jesus called him to come, Peter stepped out of the boat. Think about that. He stepped out of the safety of the boat and into the unknown, onto water that could not hold him on its own. But Peter wasn't walking on its own. But Peter wasn't walking on water because of his own strength. He was walking on water because he trusted the one who called him. And even when he began to sink, Jesus reached out and lifted him up. Friends, when we trust God's guidance, we are not stepping out on our own strength. We're stepping out on the strength of His promises. He will not let us fall. And even if we stumble, He is right there to lift us back up. Trusting God's guidance also means surrendering our own plans. So often we come to God with our own ideas of how things should go. We have dreams, we have desires, and we have desires, and we have a vision of what our future should look like. But there are times when God calls us to lay down those plans, to let go of our own agenda, and to trust that His way is better. Jeremiah 29:11 tells us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." God's plans are not always what we would choose, but they are always what's best for us. He sees the end from the beginning, and He knows the path that will lead us closer to Him, that will shape us into who we're meant to be. Trusting His guidance is about saying, "Lord, I want your will above my own. I trust that what you have planned is better than anything I could plan for myself." It's a daily surrender, a choice to follow Him even when His way looks different from ours. There will be times when we feel tempted to take control, to rely on our own understanding and make things happen in our own strength. But when we do this, we risk stepping outside of God's perfect will for our lives. We may even end up delaying the blessings He has for us because we're trying to make things happen on our own. Remember the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but when the promise didn't happen as quickly as they expected, they took matters into their own hands. The result was heartache and complication that could have been avoided if they had trusted God's timing. Friends, God's timing may not be our timing, but it is always perfect. When we wait on Him, when we trust that He is working even when we can't see it, we position ourselves to receive His blessings in His perfect time. Isaiah 40:30 says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Waiting on God is not a passive thing. It's an active trust, a patient reliance on His faithfulness. Finally, trusting God's guidance means walking by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7 reminds us, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." There will be times when God's path takes us through valleys and seasons of difficulty. Times when we don't understand why we're facing certain trials or why the journey seems so hard. But faith is not about seeing the outcome. It's about trusting the one who holds the outcome in His hands. When we walk by faith, we're choosing to believe that God is working all things together for good, even when the way forward is unclear. We're choosing to hold on to His promises, to trust in His goodness, and to believe that He will lead us safely through every season. So as you stand on the threshold of this new chapter, I encourage you to place your trust fully in God's guidance. Lean not on your own understanding. Lay down your own plans. Walk by faith and believe that He is leading you with a purpose and a plan that is greater than anything you could imagine. Trust that He knows the way, that He has already prepared the path, and that He will be with you every step of the way. God has brought you to this moment, and He will see you through it. Let your faith in His guidance be the foundation that carries you forward, knowing that wherever He leads, it is for your good and His glory. As we take each step in this journey of entering a new chapter, there's another crucial element we must embrace, and that is courage. Friends, God calls us to walk forward with courage, not because of our own strength, but because of our faith in Him. You see, there is something deeply powerful about courage that is rooted in faith. This courage doesn't deny the presence of fear. It simply refuses to let fear have the final say. It acknowledges the uncertainties that lie ahead, but chooses to believe that God is greater than any challenge, any unknown, any obstacle that may come our way. Courage grounded in faith is the kind of courage that allows us to stand firm even when the world around us is shaking. It is the courage to say, I may not know what's around the next corner, but I know the one who is leading me, and that is enough. In 2 Timothy 1:7, Paul reminds us, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. God's spirit within us is not one of timidity. It is a spirit that empowers us, emboldens us, and fills us with peace as we face the future with unwavering faith. Courage is not something we find by looking within ourselves. It is something we receive by looking up to God. Consider the story of Joshua, a man chosen to lead the Israelites into the promised land after Moses' death. Joshua had every reason to feel overwhelmed and afraid. He was taking on a monumental task, stepping into leadership after Moses, a man who had spoken to God face to face, a man who had performed miracles and led the people out of Egypt. And yet, God's command to Joshua was clear. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you. Wherever you go, God will be with you. Wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. God didn't tell Joshua to be strong and courageous because of his abilities or resources. He commanded Joshua to be courageous because he, the Lord, would be with him. And friends, that same promise is true for us. Whatever new chapter we are stepping into, God is right there with us, guiding, protecting, and providing every step of the way. Our courage comes not from what we see, but from who we know, our mighty, unchanging, ever present God. Present God. Walking forward in courage doesn't mean that we will always feel brave. Sometimes courage is simply taking the next step, even when our knees are trembling. Sometimes courage is choosing to trust God's plan, even when our heart is pounding with uncertainty. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of faith in the face of fear. When we place our trust in God, we find that our faith strengthens our courage, enabling us to do things we never thought possible. Just as David stood before Goliath, armed not with armor or weaponry, but with a deep, unshakable trust in God, we too can face our giants. David didn't focus on the size of the giant. He focused on the greatness of his God. He declared, "The battle is the Lord's." 1 Samuel 17:47. This is the heart of courage in faith. It's about knowing that the battles we face are not ours to fight, alone. God goes before us, and He fights on our behalf. Another aspect of courage is the willingness to step out of our comfort zones. So often the greatest blessings, the deepest growth, and the most profound experiences of God's presence come when we step out in faith. It's in the moments when we leave the familiar behind and take that leap of faith that we truly experience God's power at work in our lives. Peter experienced this firsthand when he stepped out of the boat to walk on water. In Matthew 14, we read that when the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they were terrified. But when Peter recognized it was Jesus, he called out, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." With his eyes on Jesus, Peter did what was impossible in his own strength. He walked on water. But the moment he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. Friends, this is a powerful reminder that our courage falters when we look at the challenges instead of the Savior. When our eyes are fixed on Jesus, we find the courage to step into the unknown, to do what seems impossible, because we know we are not walking alone. Courage also means trusting that God's ways are higher than ours. Sometimes courage looks like waiting when we want to move, staying when we want to move, staying when we want to leave, or holding on when we want to let go. It takes courage to trust God's timing, especially when His timing doesn't match our own. Isaiah 55, 8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than the earth. So are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God's perspective is far greater than ours, and He sees the end from the beginning. Our courage is strengthened when we trust that His plans, though sometimes beyond our understanding, are always for our good and His glory. Friends, courage in faith also requires resilience. There will be moments in this new chapter when we may stumble, when things don't go as we hoped. Or we may face setbacks, disappointments, and challenges that test our resolve. But courage means we don't give up. We don't turn back. Instead, we press on, confident that God is working even in the struggles, even in the waiting, even in the setbacks. James 1:2-4 tells us, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." The courage to keep going, even when the way is hard, builds our faith and shapes our character. It is in the struggle that God refines us, teaching us to rely on Him more deeply, to trust Him more fully, and to love Him more completely. As you step into this new chapter, my prayer is that you would be filled with a courage that is rooted in your faith in God. I pray that you would be bold in your trust, unwavering in your confidence, and steadfast in your pursuit of His will. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. This courage is not something we muster up on our own. It is a gift from God, a strength that flows from our relationship with Him. So let us walk forward with courage, knowing that our God goes before us, that He stands beside us, and that He fights on our behalf. Whatever challenges may arise, whatever unknowns lie ahead, remember that you are held by the one who created you, who loves you, and who will never leave you. In every step, let courage be your companion, not because you have all the answers, but because you have a Savior who is greater than anything you will ever face. Step boldly, friends, for you are not alone. God is with you, and His promise to be with you never fails. As we stand together on the edge of this new chapter, there's one final truth I want to leave with you. A truth that, if you embrace it, will shape the way you live, the way you love, and the way you love, and the way you walk forward in faith. That truth is this: every new beginning, every step we take, every act of courage, and every moment of surrender is a call to live with purpose. God has not called us to drift through life, to wander aimlessly, or to let circumstances define us. No, He has called each one of us to a life of meaning, a life that reflects His love, His grace, and His power. The purpose God has for you in this new chapter is not something small or insignificant. It is part of His grand design, a thread woven into the greater tapestry of His kingdom. And as you step forward in faith, God calls you to live each day with intention, knowing that He is using you to make an eternal impact. Living with purpose begins with understanding that you are uniquely crafted by God for this moment. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 2:10, "For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." Imagine that before you were even born, God had already prepared a purpose for you. He knew the gifts, the abilities, the passions that He would place within you, and He designed a path for you to use those gifts for His glory. You're not here by accident, and this new chapter is not a random twist in your life story. It is an invitation to step fully into the purpose for which you were created. And as you do, you'll find that God is right there guiding you, empowering you, and filling you with His Spirit to accomplish things you could never do on your own. But living with purpose also means living with a heart that's open to God's leading. It's easy to make plans and set goals, to fill our schedules with things we think are important. But friends, true purpose is found not in what we plan, but in what God directs. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." Each day, as you enter into this new chapter, take time to seek God's direction. Ask Him to show you where He wants you to go, who He wants you to serve, and how He wants you to make an impact. When you live with a heart open to God's leading, you begin to see opportunities to make a difference in ways you never imagined. You become a vessel of His love, His grace, and His truth in a world that so desperately needs Him. And living with purpose requires courage to live boldly, even when the world around you may not understand. Jesus told us in Matthew 5:14, 16, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." In this new chapter, God is calling you to let your light shine, to live in such a way that others see His love reflected in you. This is not a time to shrink back or to blend in. It is a time to stand firm in your faith, to love boldly, to serve selflessly, and to walk with the assurance that God is with you. The world may question your choices. It may challenge your values, but remember, you are called to be a light. And light does not hide. It shines. When you live with purpose, your life becomes a testimony to God's goodness and faithfulness, and through you, others are drawn to Him. As we close today, I want to encourage you to take action, to respond to the call that God has placed on your life in this new chapter. Don't let this moment pass without making a commitment to walk forward in faith. I encourage you to spend time in prayer, asking God to reveal His purpose for you in this season. Ask Him to open your eyes to the ways He wants to use you, to show you the people He has placed in your life for a reason, and to guide you in every step you take. Write down your prayers, write down what He reveals to you, and revisit those words as reminders of His promises and His direction. And I invite you to take one step this week toward living out that purpose. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who needs encouragement. Maybe it's starting a new ministry or volunteering in a way that stretches your faith. Or perhaps it's simply taking the time to share your story, to let others see how God has worked in your life. Whatever it is, don't wait. Act on the promptings that God places in your heart. Purpose is not something we wait for. It's something we step into, one faithful step at a time. And as you do, you will find that God's hand is upon you, guiding you, blessing you, and using you in ways that go beyond anything you could imagine. Friends, this new chapter is a gift from God. It's an invitation to live with purpose, to make a difference, to walk closely with the one who loves you more than you can comprehend. So let's step forward together, not with hesitation, but with faith, with courage, and with the full assurance that God is with us. Let's live each day as a reflection of His grace, a vessel of His love, and a beacon of His hope. May your life in this new chapter be a testimony of God's goodness, a witness to His faithfulness, and a light that points others to Him. Let us go forward embracing each moment, each opportunity, each challenge with the purpose that God has placed within us, for His glory, for His kingdom, and for His name. Amen.